Block Gemara. Today's daf is daf Vav. We're actually up to the Mishnah daf Hey Amud Beis towards the bottom. Just before we begin, somebody asked me today, why is a Masechta called Masechta Makos? Shouldn't it be called Malkus, which means lashes? Why is it called Makos? And the reason is because the pasuk where we learn from is V'hayim bin Hakos Russia. If you're wise, you will Hakos Russia. You will punish the Russia. So because we learn from that pasuk, and there it says Hakos, so that's why it's called Makos. Now, before we begin, what is the logic in the Gemara we learned yesterday's Gemara? And that is that the Edom Zaimim, as long as they intended to harm somebody, and Bezin sentence that person to death, then they turned out to be false witnesses, they get punished. But if they actually killed the person, then nothing happens to them. What possible logic is there? Because we made a kalachaymer and we said ein einshim min hadin, but why not? So sometimes the Marsha said in Sanhedrin that the reason why we say you don't punish from logic is because maybe you can find a counter logic. But this logic is so clear cut. If you intended to hurt somebody and you get punished, surely if you actually did hurt that person, why don't you get punished? So we have two explanations from the Kesef Mishnah of Yeshua Kara and the Ramban, exactly diametrically opposed to each other. One explanation as follows. This is the Kesef Mishnah. The whole idea of a punishment is a kapara. It's an atonement. It's atonement. And therefore, if you did a lighter punishment, the lighter Aveda, and you get a certain punishment, you cannot automatically conclude if you did a stricter Aveda, that same punishment will serve as an atonement, as a kapara. If you intended to kill somebody, the Torah says, well, we'll do to you what you did to that person. You intended to do that person, and that will be atonement. But if you actually stood there and witnessed the death of an innocent person that you know was innocent, then that is so cruel and barbaric that the punishment of kasha zamam is not sufficient. And therefore, we don't want to give you that punishment. That's one side, one logic. The Ramban says exactly the opposite. Remember, a court works. Hashem is involved in every court case, in every court ruling. So how did Hashem allow an innocent person to die? It's one thing the person didn't die, it was just, he went through the motions, he was scared, but nothing happened. Okay, so we'll punish the witnesses. But if Hashem allowed this to happen, that the innocent person died, everything is divine providence, and Hashem is involved in the court case. It must be that that person actually deserves to die. And therefore, even though the witnesses did the wrong thing and their intention was totally different, not to carry out Hashem's will, nevertheless, because what they did turned out to be this is what Hashem agreed with and consented that this should happen, punish the witness. Interesting, diametrically opposed opinions. We are up to the Mishnah of Hamad Beis toward the bottom of the page. In the pasuk says, based on 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, you must have mace. You should put the mace. You should kill the mace. In other words, we listen to a minimum of 2 witnesses. And obviously, what do you need to tell me 3 witnesses? It's redundant, as the Mishnah asks. If 2 witnesses are sufficient, why in the world would the Torah say 3? El-Lahakish, the Torah wants to equate 3 to 2. Ma'ashleisha, just like 3. Mazimin es hashnaim, 3 can repudiate 2. Avshnayim yizum l'gimel. You can have 2 witnesses repudiating. You would have thought, well, they outnumber you. How can you say that they're all liars? No, we say that 2 can say to 3 that you were not there at the time when it happened. What happens if 2 come against 100 witnesses and say all of you were not there? Witnesses in plural, no limit. Now the Gemara continues. Why does it spell out 2 and 3? For other reasons. Shimon says it's actually a sort of a leniency. That is, Mashnaim, Ein Neheragin, Achi Shnein Zaymin. If you have 2 witnesses, and then if you just credited one of the witnesses that they weren't there at the time, okay, the testimony falls apart, but nothing happens. You don't punish them. Why? You need that both witnesses should be found liars. So just like by 2 witnesses, we need both witnesses to be found liars. So too by 3 witnesses, they're not found liars unless all 3 were found to be liars. The entire group, you cannot do a part of a group. Let's say there were 100 witnesses that came along, and you found that 30, 40, 50 of them were not there at the time. It doesn't matter. Tamalaim at Adim, you need to make sure that even if you found 99 were not there, they won't get killed unless you find an entire group of 100 not there. So in other words, it's coming to be lenient and to sort of favor the witnesses, that to ensure that they don't get punished. Rabbi Kiva says, Loi bo hashlishi lahokil alahachmin olav. Rabbi Kiva says, no, it's not coming to be lenient, it's actually coming to be strict. Now, if you read the Mishnah literally, it sounds like Rabbi Kiva is arguing of Shimon. He's saying that the Torah writes 3 witnesses not to be lenient, but to actually be strict. The law says, Dinoi ki elu. And to say, and law says, Dinoi ki elu, to say that the din is exactly like, in other words, that to tell you that 2 is like 3, it's not coming to be lenient, it's actually coming to be strict. What do you mean? To tell you that you would think, well, 2 witnesses, we need to kill somebody. If there are 3 witnesses, the third person is just an adjunct. Maybe that third person should not be, included. It comes to tell you that, well, no, every single person involved there, even though their testimony is not really necessary, because once you have 2 witnesses, that's sufficient. And anybody more than that is just not extra. Nevertheless, if they're all found liars, they all will get killed. They'll all get killed. And then Rabbi Kiva continues. Now, just interesting before we move on. So I told you that some people say Rabbi Kiva argues with Rav Shimon. And there's an opinion that says Rav Shimon, what do you call it? There's an opinion that says that Rabbi Kiva argues, and he says that if 3, you, Rav Shimon, want to be lenient and said that if there were 3 witnesses came together, you won't kill the 3 unless all 3 were found liars. If 2 out of the 3 were found liars, we're not going to kill them. So according to some, Rabbi Kiva argues that. He says no, that if 2 out of 3 were found liars, we will kill the 2. We won't. Okay, once the group of witnesses, essentially the nucleus is 2. If the 2 were found liars, even though the third one was not found, we will kill the 2. Rabbi Kiva argues with Rabbi Shimon. That's what some Rishayim hold. Then we have Rabbi Yitzchak Geyus, who has the biggest chiddush of them all. He said Rabbi Kiva holds if there were 3 witnesses and 2 of them were found liars, and they weren't there at the time, not only will we kill the 2 witnesses, we will kill the third witness who was not found to be a liar, but because he associated himself with liars, therefore he will be killed as well. And in fact, he says, if you learn the Mishnah, my way is the best way to learn the Mishnah, because look at the Mishnah continues. The Mishnah says, the Im Kane on a Shakos and Aveda, the Teda punches somebody who just added on to Aveda, you're number 3, and therefore you will get killed as well. Surely, if you're helping out to do a mitzvah, you will be counted in and you will get a reward. Now, Rizgeya says, what do you mean nitful over Aveda? If he was a witness and he testified and he was a liar, he's not a nitful. Why is he just a drag along? He's just like, he's essentially the same as the rest. But if you learn my way, he was not caught out lying, but because he joined in a group of liars, he gets killed as well. Now the Mishnah, he argues, makes sense. This person is a nitful over Aveda. Why is he getting punished? Because he associated himself with people do a sin. Imagine if you associate yourself with people who do mitzvahs, what kind of reward you will have. Then the Mishnah continues. Another thing we learn out of the Akiva, if you have 2 witnesses, if one of them was found to be a relative or disqualified 8, that ruins the entire ages. So when it comes to 3 witnesses, listen, you have 3 witnesses, and one of them was a relative or puzzle, so you can argue, well, there's still 2 left. No, the entire group, they're one group, and now the part of it is destroyed, the entire group unfolds. Menayin Afilu made 100 witnesses, and only one of them was found to be a relative. How do you know that the entire witness to the testimony falls off the side? Tamulemet Eidim. Eidim means there's no limit to the. So the way now he's also being made for Rabbi Akiva, saying that if he found one puzzle, the whole 8 is apart. Person, the perpetrator. The Mishnah continues. Rabbi Yasi says, we'll learn the Mishnah like Rashi that there are going to be 2 arguments between Rabbi Yasi and Rebbe. Rabbi Yossi said, but when do we say if he found one relative, it disqualifies the entire group, it's in the fashion because it matters of life or death. As Rashi explains, why is that? Because it says we have to always try to protect the person who's being accused when it comes to murder. When it comes to money matters, three witnesses come in and say Reuben borrowed $100 from Shimon. One of them proved to be a relative. We're still going to rely on the balance of witnesses too that Reuben borrowed money from Shimon. We rely on the rest. And Rebbe says, Rebbe says makes no difference. In all cases, we say that if one of them was found to be a relative or a psul, it disqualifies the entire edus. And so, what did Rashi say? Why did Rabbi Yossi say only din nefashos? Because of the hitzilo eda, we're trying to help out the alleged perpetrator. Tosfos doesn't like that pshat at all, and Tosfos gives another pshat altogether. And Tosfos is like this: when by two, this is what he means. If two witnesses come and say Reuben killed Shimon, and one of them was found to be a liar, what do you have left? One witness. What does one witness do in the case of murder? Nothing. So just like you have two witnesses, and one of them is found to be a liar, there's no case anymore. So even if you have three witnesses, and one of them is found to be not a liar, a relative, or one of them is found to be puzzle, nevertheless, you the two witnesses left behind. And two witnesses left behind, you would think that should be all right. But we're comparing 3 to 2, just like by 2. If one is missing, one does nothing, achieves nothing by murder, capital cases. So too by 3, if one of them was found to be disqualified, the remaining 2, we toss it out. But when it comes to money matters, let's say there were 2 witnesses. One witness by a money matter can make you swear. And can make you swear. And because one witness by money matter makes you swear, so if you had 2, when it comes to din nefashos, one witness does nothing. So if you have 2 and you lose 1, you have nothing left. When it comes to din mamnas, you have 2 and you lose 1, you still have an aid that tells you that you have to swear. So if you have 3 and you lose 1, you have 2 now that make you pay. So therefore, there's a difference between din mamnas and din nefashos. That's the logic of Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi said there's no difference. So what actually is the argument? The argument is as follows. When it comes to money matters, and the witness says, a single witness says, Reuben owes Shimon $100. And Reuben, now the din has to swear that he doesn't. What happens if Reuben can't swear for whatever reason, or he's not believed, he has credibility issues? Then the din is Reuben has to actually pay. So the question is, how do we understand that? There's 2 ways of understanding that. One way is, an Eid Echad does not have the power to make Reuben pay money. All an Eid Echad has the power is to make Reuben swear. But if Reuben doesn't swear, then the Torah steps in and Torah says, okay, Reuben, pay. That's one way of viewing it. The other way of viewing it is that an Eid Echad also says, Reuben, you owe Shimon $100, makes Reuben pay the $100. However, the Torah says, when it comes to a single aid, you have 2 ways of paying. One way is physically pay the money over, another way is swear that you don't owe the money. And that's a form of payment, which means an Eid Echad also has the power to make you pay. It's just the methodology of payment that differs from 280. And that is the argument Rabbi Yossi and Rebbe. Rabbi Yossi says that an Eid Echad does not have the power to make you sorry, Rabbi Yossi said that an Eid Echad has the power to make you pay, just like you can pay with a shua. So therefore, when it comes to the nefashos, an Eid Echad does nothing. So therefore, if one falls out, you have no edus left. So if you have 3 witnesses and one falls out, we treat it as if there's no edus left, because Shnaim or Shleisha. But when it comes to din mamnas, 1 aid also makes you pay money. So if you have 2 aids, lose 1, nothing changed. 1 aid makes you pay money. The only difference is how you pay. But the aid itself can make you pay money. So therefore, it's the same way. So 1 can do. So if you have 3 and you lose 1, the 2 will do what they have to do, make you pay money. But this way, you have no way of swearing. You have to pay it back. That's Rabbi Yossi. That's why he's different. But Rebbe says din mamnas is no different than the nefashos because an Eid Echad cannot make you pay money. An Eid Echad can only make you swear, which is totally different than what they originally came to do. So if you have 2 Eidim by din mamnas and you lose 1, it's also nothing left. Either 1 Eid can make you swear, but he cannot make you pay money. Only can make you swear. The Torah steps in and says if you don't swear, you pay. So therefore, by mamnas, just like by din nefashos, a single Eid, when if you had 2 and you lose 1, there's no case left. From your initial case, it's a whole new case now. Okay, now argument number 2. Says Rebbe, by din and the foshes, the aim aside by din and the foshes. When do we say that bisman shehisubet? When do we say by din and the foshes that if there was a relative there, disqualifies the whole group? If they're really joined together, how do they join together? They gave a warning to that person. Ava bisman shehisubet. They didn't give any warning. They just happened to see an event. What do you want? Two brothers happen to be walking down the street and they saw a murder. What should they do? Therefore, they don't aid this anymore. Only if they intended to be witnesses. And how do we know that? By giving a warning. That's what Rebbe says, and Rabbi Yossi seems to learn. Even if they didn't give any warning, just the fact that there was a relative there ruins entire ages. Which means it sounds like right now, at this moment, according to Rabbi Yossi, and this is how Rashi learns, according to Rabbi Yossi, if two brothers happen to witness a murder together, that's it. There's no case because they happen to be together. Well, let's see the Gemara. Says the Gemara, when do we say that they consider one group of witnesses? They was provided they all testified within the time it says Shalom Alecha Rebbe, or some say Shalom Alecha Rebbe in my seconds. That's all. And beyond that time, you're a separate group altogether. How's a possible? Because what is it? Kadei Sheila's Talmud Torah, right? Well, a student turns around to his Rebbe and gives him, and he says, Shalom Aleichem. May it have it. The Mishnah said even 100 witnesses can be considered one group. It's impossible each witness all the witnesses to be within Teichel Dibur. And even they all say it together in unison. 100 witnesses talk together. First of all, we have a rule today: you can't hear two voices. It's like, well, it's not possible that they should all say it together. It doesn't have to be all together. If witness number one finishes and immediately witness number two starts, and immediately when number two stops, number three starts, as long as they each one continuously give with testimony, it doesn't matter that the third person is way out of opportunity, but it's considered one continuation. Okay, so now, very interesting discussion that Traces says that this thing here, we're talking about Teichel Dibur from all of each other, is only talking about a case of, it's not talking about a case of Karev Apostle. Why is that talking about a case of Apostle? In other words, he said from Rashi, it seems that even in the case of Karev Apostle, if a person is a relative, and you disqualify the whole group of witnesses, is only Teichel Dibur. Teisus wants to make a very interesting distinction. And he said like this: when it comes to Hazamah, we said that you have to find the entire group liars. Then we say that the entire group has to testify within Teichel Dibur. But when it comes to the law that says if you have a relative that disqualifies the whole group, we don't need the group to be Teichel Dibur. And why should it be different? The difference is very simple. When they're liars, it means they never saw the event. If they never saw the event, what makes them supposedly witnesses? Only when they come to Bezdin, front of the Bezdin, they speak. So therefore, all the speaking has to be next to of each other. But when it comes to Karev Apostle, they're telling the truth. Just you have a technicality here, you have a relative. So when did they become witnesses? When they saw the event. That's when they became witnesses. And therefore, it doesn't really matter when they come to court and they testify whether their testimony has to be Teichel Dibur, because that's not what makes them one group. What makes them a single group is at the time when the event occurred and they were all standing there and they all witnessed it, and therefore they bonded together then, and they became one group. Anyway, it continues. I don't understand. You tell me that one relative disqualifies the whole group. The victim himself should be able to save. According to Rebbe, you have to give warning in order to become part of the group. Okay, but according to Rebbe, anybody who was there, I don't care if you give a warning, anybody there automatically becomes part of the group. And therefore, if there's a relative there or there's a someone who's disqualified, they ruined the entire testimony. So according to Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi, even they didn't give a warning, so the victim itself is witnessing murder, and the witness itself is being murdered, then the witness is disqualified for being there, either because he's related to himself or hates the other person. We know that a Saini will learn later about a Saini cannot be a witness. So you can never have a case of murder, because the Horeg is one of the witnesses. He's witnessing his own murder. So he answers, Rabbi said to Rapapa, talking about, you're right. Normally, you cannot try anybody for murder unless the victim did not see who the murder was. He was struck from the back. Says the Gemara, okay, what about Nirba? What about somebody who was, I guess, sodomized? Yatsu, he sees the person who's doing the sodomy, and so l'chayra, he's a party to the whole. He's a witness as well, the party, and he is a relative to himself, and therefore he should disqualify the whole testimony. So he answers again, Kisharav Chayr happened behind you, didn't see. So he was okay. What about the Hoyreig, the Reivei? What about the murderer himself? And the person, the one who did the sodomy, they themselves, their part, they see what they're doing it, they see what they're doing, and they're related to us. So the Kamid Rava came for Rava Amalei, he said, Yokum Dover, the Mekaime Dover Hakosim Medaber. Rava argues and he says that Apishnaim Edom Yokum Dover. So in other words, even though this is how most Rishonim learn, even though you become a witness the moment you saw the event, if you're genuine, but it does not cement that testimony. It does not you're not really considered a total witness until you front of the bezin and you talk. Only when you mekayim what you have to say, and therefore, even though two brothers, even though you saw something, even though the horeg saw it, or the victim saw it, but the victim is not coming to the bezin to be a witness, and therefore they're not giving any testimony. They don't count. It's only if you gave the testimony. So that the confer upon you the status of an aid from the moment you saw, and then it completes it. The culmination is when you come to bezin and you speak. The horeg is not going to speak. The perpetrator doesn't speak and give testimony, not at all. So therefore, it doesn't matter that he is there and he saw what's going on. Doesn't matter. So then, if that's the case, then why does Rabbi Yossi so worried? So what's Rabbi saying here? What should two brothers do? What should two brothers do? Don't come to bezin. Only one of them should come to bezin. It doesn't matter. Remember, it's only if you come to bezin that we look at you as a group of agents. So they say we're talking about what happened. One brother's not aware that the other brother came to bezin, and he goes on his own. They didn't speak to each other, and that's what he means. Ma'yaseh shleiachim. But many Rishonim understood that Rashi holds that according to Rabbi Yossi, even if he didn't front up to bezin, just the fact that you saw it, you became a witness, and therefore there's a group of witnesses, and two brothers happen to see something, it ruins the entire testimony, which we'll come back to in a minute. What do we tell them? Case, for example, you got to give a warning. Then we know that you're all one, that you all came to testify because you all gave a warning. What about company matters? Reuben is borrowing money from Shimon, and a few people watching. How do we know if they're watching it as an observer? They're curious, thinking, they're just nosy, or is it they're watching because they want to serve as a witness? One day they might have to go to court. How do we know? This is what he said to them. You just to observe, like being nosy, curious, or you came actually come to court and to testify. Yeah, I'm to say last also we came to testify and they say we came to testify. We were watching so that one day if there's ever a dispute, we're there to give it to be a witness. Then it disqualifies the entire thing. Yeah, I'm to say we just came, we were curious. They're curious. Why should it ruin the rest of the group? It doesn't ruin the rest of the group. So some of the Shainim asked them, every time that a guy's about to kill somebody, he'll call in a couple of his relatives. Or one relative, they say, stand here, do me a favor. Stand right next to me over here. I'm going to kill the guy, hate him with a passion. You stand here, and therefore I'll never be tried. Because you say that you're here to give testimony, and you're a relative of mine. You're my cousin, my brother. So therefore, most of the Shainim learn, we don't ask the person who was a Karev or apostle, what was your intention? We ask the ones who were not a relative, and we ask them, did you come to be a witness together with that person? Were you aware that he was a relative? And we ask them, because they have no reason to lie. And this is how we make sure that the murderer doesn't have this plan that he invites his close relatives, immediate relatives, to stand there and witness what he's doing. Says the halach is like Rebbe, so which means that you have to that applies in all cases, but nevertheless, only if we know for sure that they came to testify. According to Rabbi Yossi, the way Rashi learns, it seems the way the Shem understood Rashi, he learns even if he didn't come just to testify, it doesn't matter. If a relative is there, it ruins the whole thing. So all the Rishonim ask, when you go to a chuppah or you go to a wedding, you go to see a get, if there are many relatives there. And according to Rabbi Yossi, and some hold halacha of Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi, the relatives there ruin the testimony for everybody else. In other words, according to Rabbi, just because we're all there at the chuppah, we're not planning to be witnesses, and therefore it's not a problem at all. The fact that we are relatives doesn't ruin because by kedusha you need two witnesses. We don't have no impact on that because we're not part of the group. But according to Rabbi Yossi, the way Rashi understands Rabbi Yossi, that even if two brothers happen to witness something, it ruins the entire group of Eidim. So how can you ever have a public chuppah? And because of that problem, even though so remote, because only Rashi according to Rabbi Yossi and the halacha really like Rebbe, that's why by all chuppahs we say we designate you two to be the witnesses to exclusion of everyone else. And this way we take care that no one else should be involved. The next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah continuing, two people, two witnesses who were watching the event from one window. Two people watching the event from another window. So there's a person standing in the middle, and he was giving a warning. Are they one group or not? We're watching the same event. So if one person in group A is able to see group B, and according to some, and one person in group B can see group A, then they bond together and they become one group. But if not, if they cannot see each other, they consider two different groups altogether. All different groups. The fiqh, therefore, and the reason why we talk about a person standing in the middle is because this makes more sense how he ties together the two groups. How they're aware of each other's presence because they hear this guy's warning, so they know there's something happening, and that's how they become part of the group. Okay, so it depends if they see each other or not. Do they become one group or not? Therefore, and the chiddush here is that neither of the two groups are giving the warnings. The third party altogether, and that's good enough. Therefore, so what happens? Interesting. If we treat them like two different groups, group A and group B witness Reuben killed Shimon, but they didn't see each other. So it comes out an extraordinary thing. What happened? Group A was found to be liars. They weren't there at the time. We're going to kill Group A, but at the same time, we're going to kill the Reuven for killing Shimon because Group B remains intact because they weren't found liars. They're not part of Group A. They're two independent groups from each other, two disparate groups. And so here you have an interesting thing. We're killing the witnesses for giving false testimony, and turned out to be the testimony wasn't false because we're going to kill Reuven. But because their testimony was false, because they weren't there at the time, that's the grounds for killing them. One of them was found to be a liar. That group will be killed, but also so too will Reuven. The same group is Potter. Rabbi Yossi says, you don't get killed. Rabbi Yossi says, no, I disagree. I say that you can't have a third party giving the warning. The witnesses themselves have to be involved in the warning. Says al pi shnaim edim, that the pi shnaim above the two edim are the ones who have to not only come to court and testify, but al pi means that they have to be the ones giving the warning as well. David Achar, this pasuk al pi shnaim actually teaches something else as well. Shaloi take anhedrin shemas Peter. We should hear direct from the witnesses that test, not a middleman. What's the problem with the middleman? We'll see in a minute in the Gemara. We'll discuss. Now, the places brings that there's some people who want to say that the only time we kill the witnesses is if the witnesses at least have to see, if they don't see each other, two different groups, but they have to be able to see the person who gave the warning. And and that's important because they want to learn that the master, the third party, becomes a third witness to either group because they both see him, and therefore he gets killed with the group of witnesses as well if it turned out to be that he wasn't there at the time. Okay. Anyway, the Gemara further. How do you know if you have one witness looking, seeing, viewing something from the window, and another witness from another window, and they don't see each other? So on the one hand, you think you have two witnesses who saw Reuben kill Shimon, but the two witnesses didn't see each other. How do you know Eid is Michedesh Shipsula? It's qualified. You know, it says Lo Yumas Api Eid Echad. It says in the Torah you shouldn't kill someone based on the testimony of a single aid. That can't mean literally what we just said, because what does that mean? That what a single aid cannot bring someone to the ultimate punishment. From the beginning of the pasuk, Al Pish Naim It says based on two witnesses. Obviously, one's no good. You have two witnesses, but if each is individual, they're not aware of the other's presence, they don't join together. We actually learned similar. Two people. Two people saw the event, but one from this window, that window, they don't see each other, they don't combine. And we're talking here about being the first, we're talking about life and death. When it comes to money matters, we already learned before that even if they didn't see the same, even they did not see the same loan. One aide says, I saw a loan, Reuben borrowing $100 Shimon on $100 on Sunday. Another aide says, I saw borrowing $100 on Monday. So they're not talking about the same loan. But because they're both saying the same thing, that Reuben definitely owes money $100 to Shimon, they combine together. Not only that, even one after another. Even one after another, you saw part of it and I saw part of it in the same window, but we didn't see each other. Aim and stuff, you don't combine. I don't understand. Isn't that obvious? In the case where they saw the entire event, yet because they didn't see each other, you're saying it's not considered one testimony. So if they didn't see each other and they only saw each a half of the event, of course it's not one testimony. What I need to tell me, that one person through this window and this window. Each one saw the entire, yet you tell me they don't combine. If each one only saw part of it, this one saw half of the bed, but saw half of the bed. Boy, you got to tell me. Amalei said, we're talking about a case here where we commit, let's say, adultery or incest. And over there, if you see only part of it, the other part of it, it's good enough. Because even part of it is already full of data. And that's the chiddush that you don't combine. My Rava says, Rava, and even though the same window, so it's more than just two separate windows, but because we weren't together at the same time, we're not considered a group of witnesses, a group of two witnesses. Rava says that if they saw the person who they didn't see each other, but they saw the middle person, and they saw masa, that's good enough. Furthermore, Rava says Rava, Masa she'amru. When we say that somebody has to warn, even if the victim itself warned, said, hey, to the perpetrator, if you're going to do this to me, this is going to be a punishment. Nevertheless, good enough. Or a film shed, even if it wasn't a human, it was merely a demon to give the warning, that is good enough. What exactly Rav is saying here is, in our Mishnah, when we say that, two groups of witnesses and all that, they're able to see the person get a warning. But most learn that we're not talking about the Mishnah at all. We're talking about the last case we said. One witness is out of this window, and one witness is out of that window. That they don't like to form one witness. They're one group. If they both see the person giving me, and that's good enough. He binds the two together, they become one aid. Says the Gemara further. When it comes to dinner money matters, one looking at this window, one looking at that window is good enough. Only when it comes to dying, killing, we say that a single aid, which we learned before, one aid here and one combined. But in the following, the aim, that is when it comes to money matter, says you want to mask it, and what's the logic? Because by din we try to help out, the alleged murderer, And therefore we say, look, here we have it. They don't see each other, two different groups. We're going to disband the whole thing. Says the Gemara, according to this, but in the Foshes. So if you have, let's say, so let's say the other round. You're telling me you have two groups of witnesses in two separate windows, and they don't see each other. They're considered two separate groups. That if one was found liars, we'll kill that one group, but we'll also kill the perpetrator. In this case, let's say the opposite other way around. The only reason why you said two separate windows, we don't combine them, is to help out the murder, so we don't have witnesses. But if you have two groups of two witnesses and they don't see each other, let's say the other way around. Let's say that they do combine together. And therefore they do combine together. And if one witness out of the four now was found to be a liar, we disqualify the whole testimony. And let's help if the whole reason is to help the perpetrator out, in this case, let's help out the other way. Kasha, that is a problem. Has not been resolved. Rabbi Yossi says they have to give their own warning. I'm a couple of items. Rabbi Yossi holds you actually have to give a warning. But now we learn Rabbi Yossi if an enemy goes ahead and kills somebody, says, "Oh, I did it inadvertently; it was an accident." We don't believe it. We're going to kill you. You know why? Because since we already established you hate the person, then the probability is that you probably did it deliberately, and you try to back what you did by coming up with this this trumped up idea that you did by mistake. So, but where's the warning? Because it's as if you already warned. So the basic clearly holds you don't have to warn. How can you say over here that witnesses are not to give the warning? So Gemara says, there's two for Rabbi Yossi. I'm like, who Rabbi Yossi about Yehudi? The Tanya have to give a warning. The only reason I give a warning is so we can determine whether he did it on purpose or by mistake. So if we don't have a warning, the only reason I have a story is to determine whether it was done inadvertently or on purpose. And therefore, but our Rabbi Yossi hold that you have to give warning. There's a custom. And therefore, in order for witnesses to qualify to be witnesses, they have to give Shira. Then we continue. Sanhedrin through a middleman. Hanul Uzi, they were these people who only spoke other languages, the vernacular or Aramaic. They came to Rabbi, an interpreter. He said an interpreter. Says the Gemara, we just said that you have to be able to hear directly from the witnesses. How did he do that? But now we learn like they said in he shouldn't have an interpreter. When answers Rabbi made up he understood very well their language, their vernacular. But Hadud speak it. So therefore, for that is all right. We actually have Sanhedrin know the languages. Some of them enough they understand. Some of the Shainim want to say. So some say the reason why cannot happen is because the Rabbi says no. Is because it's no longer you're hearing directly from the witness, you're hearing from another witness who heard the witness. That's called aid mipi aid. You're hearing from one witness or heard from another if you don't understand directly what the witnesses are saying. And the Torah says Apishnayim Eidim has to be directly from the Eidim. If that's the case, then it only applies to witnesses. But when it comes to, let's say, the plaintiff or the defendant, then there's nothing wrong with having an interpreter. However, there are others who say that the same din applies to the plaintiff and defendant. That the court judges should not have to have an interpreter in between the two. When it says, and when the Gemara says over here that you need, it's the same logic. By Zapi, we have to hear that from them. From the plaintiff and the attorney, we have to know what they're saying without a middleman in between. And this case of Hani Lu'uzi that came before Rava is not talking about the witnesses, it's talking about the plaintiff. The plaintiff came before Rava, and the Gemara's question is, you understand? And we say, no, you have to understand. You can't have a plaintiff coming in having an interpreter and the Dayan doesn't understand, because it's not just the words, it's also the emotion, it's much more than just the words. And if you don't understand what he's saying, you have some middleman who's third party repeating. The guy said it doesn't have the same flavor, and you don't have the same feeling, and so on. So the interesting machlekes that continues to the Mishnah. The nine Eloi between Eloi to those relatives of the guarantor, particular loan. So they were the witnesses, but they were relative not to the borrower or the lender, they're relative to the guarantor. Is that a problem? So the Papa thought, as long as, in other words, how do we view the guarantor? A Papa said the guarantor is owned. It doesn't work out, you guarantor. So it's not directly involved, indirectly, and they're not related, therefore, to the borrower and lender. It's good enough. So the Papa name, Gabi label mal, but they're not related. It's good enough. But no, since if the borrower cannot pay, they go to the guarantor. It's as if the guarantor is included in this directly in this loan. It's as if the lend the money to the guarantor, and therefore, if these aidim are now eat less later the late also. If the lady doesn't have any money to go to the Malva to collect, and therefore totally involved. Okay, Moed, I think tomorrow back to normal.